Welcome everybody to this Business Analytics from Data to Insights webinar. We're going to wait just a few more seconds while your colleagues join us here in this web conference space. We are at the top of the hour. Let me get us started here and describe a bit about the flow of the next hour and introduce myself and my colleague Dave Paretsky, who's on the line with me. So this is a marketing informational overview of the Business Analytics from Data to Insights course. It's offered by the Wharton School in collaboration with our partners at Emeritus. Today we are joined by Dave Paretsky, who's CEO at Invista Strategies and a program leader for this next cohort of business analytics. I'm Don Huseman. I'm the Managing Director for Online Learning at Wharton, and I will be regularly visiting these webinars and webcasts with the faculty as the course progresses. So what we're going to do over the next hour is ask the question, why would you choose this course over the other options that are in the space? What is the particular character of the course in this format and as we're offering it here through the Wharton School? We're also going to spend about a half of this time presenting to you the outline of the course so you get a sense of the topics that are covered and whether it's right for your current needs and your current circumstances. And then we're going to spend a lot of time just taking your questions and trying to make sure that you know what's required of this class, what would be the expectations on both the students and on the faculty who are joining this session. So the questions that are raised by the students and the faculty who have engaged in this course in the past have been basically four. One is the general question about the current state of the art of business analytics. This is an open field. This is not settled science. So as we're identifying different ways in which analytics could possibly improve our businesses, we will rely upon you as leading practitioners in your area, in your industry, to come to the table with top scholars in the field to ask that question. We'll be looking at questions of the types of data that we can collect or use to inform our decisions and the various sources of those data. We'll be asking ways in which certain companies have taken the lead in advancing analytics in the current environment. And as I mentioned, this is a very big field of study currently. And then finally, the question is how to identify the questions in my company that are relevant to leading a company, that are relevant to C-suite executives, that can be informed by an inquiry into the data that I have, or in engagements with the analysts who work at my company, who run the data warehouses, the different sources of data that are available to the company. So this course is for you if these general learning objectives sound like they're a good fit. So if it is the case that you're interested in learning more about data analytics through a survey that touches upon a whole variety of research scholarly fields in understanding applications of data to marketing, operations, finance, different aspects of a business, if you're interested in learning how other companies are using business analytics today. Secondly, it may be the case, and it has been in cohorts in the past, that individuals involved in this course have been asked to lead or participate in a data analytics initiative at their own company. And so in that regard, we'll be helping you understand the types of data analytics that other companies have engaged with on the descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive fronts. And then we'll be spending a lot of time on exercises to help you ask the right questions in presenting analyses of data, to act as sort of a translator in between executive sponsors and data analysts who may be in your IT organization. Finally, if you're a general manager or a small business owner yourself who is interested in leveraging analytics across your own business. We'll give you some opportunities to get your hands on to specific data analytics problems that we present for you, and your opportunity to bring up your own to learn how analytics can help you answer key questions about your business. So the primary reason for you to join this class is to make better decisions around your business today using data. Now, the business analytics course that we're presenting to you through Wharton Online brings with it a particular characteristic of the Wharton School, which is to say that there are business schools that have an orientation towards studying cases and doing applications of qualitative research around business issues and questions that face leaders of businesses. That's not the Wharton approach. The Wharton approach over the years has developed around the quantitative study of empirical data. So what can we actually measure about a business that we can then use to formulate models or ideas of how variables might interact in ways that affect business outcomes based on choices and decisions that business leaders make. And then finally, how do we use various techniques for optimizing those decisions so that people can make the very best choices given what we know from the empirical data that we're observing in the marketplace that we're engaging with today. Jeff Garrett, who's our dean, has made the point that Wharton is unusual among business schools in that we have had a long history of doing this type of quantitative data analysis. And that as we have seen in recent years, the availability of new forms of data because of internet and e-commerce solutions and other ways we've been able to collect and analyze data, we have new opportunities for using analytics to generate better decisions. And that's a particular sort of orientation of the large business faculty we have at Wharton. That history is an old one. This is a picture of Emery Johnson, a former dean actually, and one of our professors of transportation and commerce back in the early part of the 20th century. His work actually began in the prior century, in the 19th century, in which he used his knowledge and access to the data stores that governments had put together around following the tariffs or the fees associated with using the system of inland waterways and canals that had been built in North America. Professor Johnson studied those in order to help understand and predict what fees should be used for the new engineering project called the Panama Canal that had connected the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. So it was Professor Johnson's work that put together the first P&L for that engineering project, and is suggestive of the type of work that Wharton faculty have been engaged with ever since. So over the course of the 20th century, scholars in particular fields of study, from marketing through operations through economics, have attempted to put together similar studies in which we have groups of researchers collecting data on a particular question or project. So for example, Professor Willits led the first business school research center, the foundation of the first business school research center. And actually that center is still in existence and producing productive research these days. It's now called the Center for Human Resources, led by Professor Peter Capelli, who will be joining us in the class. The IRU, the Industrial Research Unit, sent out students as well as hired researchers to do time and motion studies in factories in the early 20th century to identify process flows, bottlenecks, and to do what we would call today business process reengineering. In the 1960s, Professor Paul Green led an initiative in our marketing department to take marketing away from being what it was at that time, which was essentially seen as a creative exercise, into a scientific stance. Excuse me. So Professor Green invented the concept of conjoint analysis, and in that process brought a new, sorry, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. Um, uh, in that process, brought a new scientific rigor to the study of marketing. Professor Simon Kuznets was involved with the Roosevelt administration in the 1940s as the U.S. economy transitioned from a peacetime to a wartime footing. And in that process, he was studying the interconnection of manufacturing centers across the country as a single system. In the metrics he developed for that after the war, he included in efforts to study other aspects of the economy beyond manufacturing through the agricultural sector and the service sector and the various other sectors that made up the economy, together putting together a set of metrics which he called the gross domestic product, which is an outcome variable, of course, that has been used in many econometric models ever since. Professor Lawrence Klein joined Professor Kuznets in receiving the Nobel Prize for work on econometrics in the 1980s, where the work that was done to collect data informed models that were then used to predict activities that might result as a result of changes, let's say, in tax policy or fiscal policy at the governmental level. So the field of econometrics emerged out of these empirical studies in the 20th century. All of those research centers published. The objective has always been to make a change in practice. And in that regard, we've studied everything from healthcare through manufacturing, through the impact on race relations in the country as a result of changes in business processes. And you'll see here, for example, in the corner, one of our Wharton faculty with President Lyndon Johnson, who had designed the Medicare system. More recently, Zeke Emanuel, professor in our healthcare management group, has been a primary architect of the Obamacare structures. So this engagement of scholarly research with practitioners has been at the heart of the Wharton School faculty's work since our inception in the 1880s. The research centers today look more like this. So we have 20 fully staffed and funded Wharton Academic Research Centers, and we've drawn from these centers for the faculty who'll be teaching in this class. Another distinction of this class versus some of the other options that are in the marketplace is that only tenured faculty who are active researchers in this space will be joining you in this class. So from our People Analytics group, from our Fishman-Davidson Center, from the Customer Analytics Initiative that is now staffed by marketing faculty. We'll be drawing faculty to help you in the formation of your own questions to be answered by the data you have access to, but also to share with you their consulting and work with the companies who have engaged with these centers currently to advance questions in their own industries. So with that, let me turn over to my colleague, Dave Paretsky, who is a program leader with the Emeritus Group, and will be actively engaged with you as we walk through the different types of study that you'll be engaged with through the course of the next 11 weeks or so. Dave, you want to take over from here?
Sure. Hi, Don. We're going to have to, let's see if we can get this switched.
Let me stop sharing so I can turn it on.
And just a quick bit of housekeeping for those that have submitted questions. We will be getting to the Q&A. Thank you, by the way, for submitting through the Q&A dialog box. It makes life easier as we catalog your questions and then we can address them. And then we will be getting to them just after the presentation. So we'll go over the course outline, and then we will go over your questions one by one. And we should have plenty of time to get to all of them. So please rest assured. So right now I'm just going to get our screen going back to the right. I guess when I do slideshow mode, I have to skip right to slide. My apologies for the replay here. So just in case you didn't quite get it the first time around, we're giving you the second time around. And here we go. So as Don mentioned, I'm one of 4 program leaders for this course. Just for logistics, what we do is we break you down into cohorts, which is what we do on campus with graduate level education and executive education. It makes the discussions a little bit more manageable, but it is one, it is arbitrary, and 2, when we have interactions like office hours and webinars, everybody's together, and honestly, we're happy to have you approach any course leader with any question, and vice versa. We are really here as extensions of the faculty team. We've all been involved with this course for several runs. We have our MBAs ourselves and have been involved on the student side of the equation, but also on the teaching side. I also do teach offline in the bricks and mortar education world here in New York City at Baruch College. So just to move on to the course, business analytics, as Don described, it's an evolving field. There's an evolving body of work. It is not finished science. So our job is really to, one, introduce, or in many cases for you, reintroduce some of the terminology, understand, just make sure we're all on the same page when we're discussing the concepts and frameworks when we're talking about business analytics. Many of these frameworks are not hard and fast rules, but they've become accepted vernacular and accepted terminology within the industry. And again, our primary goal is not to train you as data scientists. In fact, many of you participants can train us, but rather look at the cross-section or the intersection of data science, data analytics, and then traditional business decision making. So as business analytics makes its way into the executive suite, what are the areas where you as executives want to be sort of the skilled interpreters between the worlds of data science and business decision making, regardless of how much of your job sits on the data science side of things or how much of your job sits on the executive decision making side of things. So that's really the sort of framework we use. And the way we do it is through a somewhat unique approach. And I can say this somewhat objectively, having seen a bunch of data analytics courses in the marketplace. When with Wharton, what you're getting is an all-star team, if you will, a specialized team of researchers, as Don described. These are the faculty names who are individual names within the field who essentially dedicate themselves to giving you 1 to 2 course modules, depending on the faculty member, and they will lead each of those modules as we go through the course. So we'll take a quick brush over those course modules, and you'll get an idea of the faculty members. Not only will you see their video lectures that they record for the course, but you'll also there'll be faculty webinars where you can interact with them one by one. And Don and I stand as extensions of that team, so you'll have that consistency of us in the course, and at the same time you're going to hear from the researchers directly from the proverbial horse's mouth. So again, just moving on. First, we start really with the current data sets, descriptive analytics, which, as many of you know, that's when we describe what happens, what has happened. And as we look at more as data sets increase in size, as the tools available to process descriptive data become more ubiquitous and more accessible, we use it as a way to introduce the topic, understand where we've come from. You know, there's a commonly cited statistic, whether it's exact or not is more of a conversation point, but there's a commonly cited statistic that the world produces the same amount of data every 2 days as it did from the inception of history until 2003. So there's a lot of, now whether that's the exact number or we're going to take a different measurement, there's an enormous amount of data out there, and that number is adjusting every day. So how do we deal with the growing level of the V's of data as we describe them, the volume of data, the velocity of data is coming at larger and larger data sets, the velocity of data, we're coming faster and faster, and the variety of data. As you know, because you are all consumers as well as purveyors and suppliers of data, you know that data is accessible through means today that weren't even dreamed of 10, 20, 30 years ago. So our first model is really to understand the evolution of descriptive analytics and the tools that we can use now that frankly we were not always able to use to gather insights from those analytics. Then we move into the idea of extracting predictive value. So at first, the first step of that is to, through descriptive analytics, and again, through Dr. Viragavian, understanding the operational component and understanding also how we're now, for the first time, looking at how companies will use descriptive analytics. Because, for example, when we're dealing with airline pricing and airline operations, we are often now having to make predictions and understand from the larger and larger data sets that are available how we can make decisions based, again, understanding, allocating scarce resources. And in a complicated business like airlines, allocating scarce resources, running our business, running the operations. And so this is a nice introduction to, again, it's part 2 of our descriptive analytics series, but it's really, it borders on, it really starts to extract predictive value. So, and I think the lines sometimes get blurred between descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, but the notion is you're starting with enormous data sets, you're using tools to interpret and analyze those data sets, and then you're starting to process those data sets to make decisions for you and your business. So we start to get into that reasonably quickly into the course. Then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but then as we look at more predictive value from our descriptive data, it's a nice chance to work with Dr. Fader, who's a very well-known professor here on the Wharton campus, as are all of the team members. But as I said, these are names you're going to see in the professional body of work, whether through white papers or books or lectures. And so it's nice to have this up close access. And we're going to take a tried and true statistical methodology, which is regression. Now, I'm going to stop and answer the questions that may have been asked right now about preparation and statistical analytics, because this is something we get all the time. And what we do for this course in terms of statistical methodology, on one hand, we really want everyone that if you're not entering the course with at least an appreciation for statistical analysis, we would like to help proliferate that. Now, an appreciation does not necessarily equate to a fluency or a universal capability, and we recognize that. And so when we talk about regression models, for example, we will be running some regressions, but it will be a guided tour. I equate it to having training wheels on a bicycle, where they are there if you want them, and at the same time, you can also ride that bicycle and keep those training wheels in the air. So when it comes to some of the practitioner tools, so for example, we will use Excel with the add-ins, with the data analytics or with the analysis add-in, and use tools like regression analysis. We'll talk about the solver tool later on. So we will use universally available tools, but we don't get into, for example, coding. We talk about R, we talk about Python, but we don't get into those programs in a way that you have to demonstrate any kind of fluency. We just want to give you some exposure, so that as Don said early on, as most executives have to play that role of interpreter, you're standing between the data science worlds and the executive decision-making worlds, and we want you to be equally comfortable in both. And so with predictive analytics in Module 3, it's a great way to, one, be acquainted with how predictive value or how predictive analytics is derived from that pool of descriptive analytics, and then also some of the common tools, starting with regression analysis, understanding correlation and causation, and essentially understanding the relationship between two bits of information or two columns of information is it really stands at the heart of statistical analysis, which in turn stands at the heart of predictive analytics. So we spend a little bit of time here. It's a fun module, and it gets us, as I said, it's going to give you some pleasant dreams or unpleasant nightmares of graduate level statistical analysis, but only in a small taste. So it is manageable, and I dare say it's actually a bit fun. Then, as I said, we do get into a bit of optimization. Again, these are this is Dr. Savin, who is another professor of operations here at Wharton, now operations, information, and decisions. And it's a wonderful way of taking a relatively traditional engineering sort of an engineering type course. I mean, a business school operations course has many elements of engineering in it. Understanding, again, how to get from point A to point B in your decision making, understanding optimization, understanding constraints, really trying to turn decision making into a bit of a linear process so as to normalize the different factors and therefore be able to compare decisions to one another. And how can we do that using data, using predictive and prescriptive data analytics? And so this is essentially a merger of, the sexy new topic, if I may, the business analytics with traditional operations. And really this as this gets onto the chief operating officer's desk, it's a really nice way of combining the old and the new. And as I said, with the regression analysis, the optimization case studies are guided tours, so that the spreadsheets are given to you. The demos are very hands-on, and so for those of you with no experience in optimization or solver, you will be brought up to speed. You'll have your hands held. For those of you who do have experience, it's a topic you'll be able to move more quickly through. But really, it's a sense of looking at these techniques, but understanding the underlying concepts, and then how they integrate with the decision making. In other words, answering that "so what" question. You can run these regressions, you can run these solver problems, but so what? What is the consequence in terms of business decision making? And that's really what we're after in this course. And again, then Dr. Savin continues, and there's a nice case study with Europa Solvent. As Don has said, we do use a number of cases in this course. Now, by cases, some of the cases are more traditional, where you'll see the storytelling context behind it. And in many ways, the Wharton approach, Wharton certainly has a well-earned reputation for not being afraid of getting involved directly with the numbers, with the linear problem solving. And so what will often happen is and Dr. Savin's a great example of that, is we will take bits and bytes of the cases and look at the solvable components. So understanding, again, the basic optimization problems, but understanding where that data comes from and how that predictive value of the data is extracted from the data sets, and how you can turn that into an aid for your decision-making process. Again, I just want to remind you, we love seeing the questions come in. We are tracking them. As we wrap up the presentation component in a few minutes, we will get to the questions. So I don't want to discourage you from that. We've just learned we want to keep the path reasonably. We want to keep up the momentum. Then we get into Dr. Bidwell. We move into the management side of things, and Matthew Bidwell is a well-known professor of management at Wharton. Again, we talk about understanding, basically optimizing employee performance. Now, there is no one single metric. If there were, then we would either all be Nobel Prize winners or all be out of a job. There's no one single metric that acts as a predictor of consistently good employee performance, or long tenure, or trusted partnership, or any of these desired traits you see in employee performance. However, there are factors that correlate, and so what we'll use is a bit of regression analysis and correlation analysis, understanding which characteristics tend to correlate with the proper employees, and also how we can use predictive analytics to select for those characteristics. So it's not and taking into account survey bias, and taking into account interview bias, and taking into account some of the hiring mistakes that are made over the years. And so Dr. Bidwell, both in and out of this course, spends a lot of his time helping companies to optimize their employee development programs at all stages in that employee supply chain, if you will, from the pre-screening to the pre-selection to the hiring to the development and ultimately to the attrition or even to the attrition prevention. And so you'll see the statistical backbones of that process and really turning into the analytical backbones of that process. There are entire courses and entire studies that are done on the HR analytics, HR management analytics components of this. So here we're just getting a bit of a taster. And so I do recommend that this is a nice way for you to sort of dip yourself into the HR, the human element, if you will, of the data analytics process as it comes down to people management and people analytics. Here, Dr. Berman provides a nice module. In fact, in this current run of the course, we just got through this last week, where we look at prescriptive analytics when it comes to pricing. And there are ways to statistically analyze a consumer's willingness to pay, which allows us to optimize profit and ultimately determine the right price for each product. And so Dr. Berman goes through a few examples of this, gives the background of how we derive this willingness to pay. It also has it's a key ingredient in bundling pricing. So anybody who's ever ordered cable television or any sort of media or any sort of cell phone consumers, anything where products are bundled together, a lot of the psychology behind bundling process, not just the psychology, but all of the analytics behind bundling pricing has to do with determining the marginal willingness to pay for that next product or by that next person. And so we look at some of the math behind that. And again, for the math enthusiasts, I think you're going to have a good time with this. For the math phobes, I will reassure you that this is a guided tour as well. So you will get examples, and then they're explained on video. You can also run them on your own Excel spreadsheet side by side, and then check your answers. So again, there's no danger of the bottom falling out from you if you're not entirely comfortable with the math or the linear equation side of this. It's provided as a backstop, but it is a great way to break this down into a bit more of a linear process and get to these concepts. And also, again, just like the other modules, understanding how these topics overlay with data analytics and how some of these linear approaches, which have been around for decades, if not centuries, how they've been adjusted to reflect the wider availability of data and the significantly increased capability of analyzing the data. Then we get into some decision tree analysis, and Dr. Gans is again another top management science professor. You're seeing, so from the management department we have Dr. Bidwell and Dr. Berman, Dr. Gans. It's a nice way. So you'll see we go from the operations department, where we have some of our leadership there, moving into the management department, and here actually Dr. Gans sort of runs. Has feet in both worlds, just like this course does. And so in this case, we're using data to analyze predictive decisions. And many of you have seen decision trees before. If you haven't, we promise we will. They are. The nice thing about decision trees is, one, they're highly relevant, probably the most commonly used element of statistical analysis in business today. And two, the math is reasonably simple. So these are basically a series of weighted average equations with a relatively definable left side, right side. And as I said, the math is even though there might be a lot of writing on the paper, and certainly when you're getting into some of the graphical depictions, the visualizations may look more complicated. But these are nice ways to take reasonably complicated concepts and explain them in a somewhat simple and linear fashion. And so decision trees are, as I said, to me, it's among the most applicable lessons in the course, because many of us are using them whether we realize it or not. But we're looking at one decision versus the other. We're looking at the outcome, we're looking at the cost, and we're looking at the probability of this thing happening. And really, that when we talk about a value of a decision, that's the multiplication. What is the probability of this thing happening? What is the expected outcome, and measured either in profit or revenue or other positive measurements, or even negative measurements or negative outcomes, and we look at how to optimize success and minimize failure, or at least mitigate the chances of failure and maximize the chances of success. So it's a great way to spend some time in decision trees. And it's almost like having 6 different statistical analysis courses in one, because we do move from topic to topic each week, but with that common thread under with that sort of data analytics common thread. And again, then we go into the application side. We've seen all of these concepts in the course. We spend a week at a time presenting the information and bringing you up to speed. In many cases, through our discussion groups, you're bringing each other up to speed. That's the beauty of executive education. We have people here with 5 years experience and people here with 35 years of experience. And so we are fully, we fully expect and hope that as you participate in these discussions, that you're bringing your own experiences and you're looking at these topics through your own lens, because like Don and I will be the first to tell you, we all know something about something, and we all can use a little help in everything else. And so we believe even our finest professors in management and operations will often participate in webinars and learn from the students as they look at these problems through the lens of their businesses and their industries. And so we do get a chance toward the end of the course to look at some of the better known brands, and look at, from the simple and intuitive to the complex and somewhat counterintuitive, look at ways that they apply these concepts into the into the workplace. So what happens as a consumer of Starbucks, how Netflix develops its search recommendation engine. How does it know what movies you like because you've watched X, Y, and Z, which is relatively simple and straightforward choice filtering and analysis. And so it's interesting how that comes into play, and even in your regular internet searches, and certainly in big box retailing. So we joke that sometimes you'll never go and use the internet again once you realize how much of a data provider you are every time you use a computer. On the other hand, most people are over that hump, and it's actually nice to have an understanding of where that information is used and looking at it from the business's perspective. And so it's a nice fun module at the end of the course. So really, as we look at the course, these are some of the key, when we talk about some of the key features, we look at some of the frameworks. Frameworks and terminology are, and I said this earlier, are not hard and fast rules so much as part of the literature, part of the body of work, part of helping us to speak a common language with one another. So again, we're going to be looking at different analytics frameworks, getting some help, bringing you up to speed. If these are part of your work, if you're in the operations part of the company, or you're a data scientist, and these are part of this is part of having a cup of coffee in the morning, then this is something where you'll probably spend more time looking at the overall context of data analytics and how these are featured in. If these are new to you, then you'll probably have to spend some more time getting up to speed. And again, it is a bit of a handheld process. And so we would see many sides of that spectrum. But understanding that the statistical underlying basis of these is key in data analytics. And so we do want to make sure that you're walking out of this, if you're going to get the course certificate, then you've at least been exposed to these concepts and how they're incorporated into today's data analytics vernacular. So again, you'll see the live faculty webinars is a key course. That's probably my favorite part of the course here, which is on one hand, you have each week we will have the video modules, and you'll have about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours worth of short videos and exercises for you to do on your own time. It's completely on demand. It is, doesn't matter where you are in the world or when you have to dedicate, as long as you can take 5-10 minutes at a time, you'll be able to catch up on that. And then we have the office hours, which we'll get to, which are completely informal ways of stopping in, asking questions, having a discussion. And that middle ground is the live faculty webinars, which we sort of start with the middle here, which really allows you to interact directly with the professors involved. They will often present some slides or have a bit of a lecture that they're presenting, and this is a less formal version. Sometimes you'll even see them, in sweaters and t-shirts or running these from the hotel rooms if they're speaking at conferences, because it is live and it is customized for you here in this course. But they will spend at least half the time, if not more, addressing your questions. And a lot of the questions are not simple clarification questions, which you're entitled to ask, but a lot has to do with how these concepts are applied in different industries and in different jobs. And it's a fun back and forth. As I said, it's a nice feature of this particular course because it is a team taught course. You're getting exposed to 4 or 5 different professors throughout the course. So why not have the chance to interact with them, not only through your video coursework, which has been sort of preordained, but also directly and live in the faculty webinars. So again, these are the 4 folks you'll hear from directly. Don and I are involved in most, if not all, of these webinars as well. So you'll have that consistency, that thread that runs throughout the course. And at the same time, it's almost like having a guest host or a guest star for each webinar. And it really, the dialogue becomes between you and the professor directly. We're here to facilitate. We'll often remind you or the professors of questions that might have arisen during the office hour discussions, but the faculty webinars are a real treat. And, we look forward to those. We've talked a little bit about who we are, and we've introduced ourselves and certainly our faculty team, and just a little bit about how you are. When we look at the last few runs of this course, historically, this is where you come from. There are many people in the consulting side, but you'll see and then financial services is a big one. Healthcare is a big one, but it is a reasonably diverse group based on industries, and that's important because what it does is I'll be honest, it makes for a bit of a challenge sometimes because we know that these concepts are being applied through different lenses, and depending on where you are in the industry spectrum. And I should say, aside from these industries and included in this sort of other category is also nonprofits and government organizations. And so that sometimes gets overlooked in the mix, but we often get that question: if I'm in a nonprofit or if I'm in politics or government or policy, do these concepts also apply? And I think the answer kind of speaks for itself. Any large organization, or quite frankly, any small organization, any organization that has any sort of flows of people, products, services, really has to measure performance, all qualifies. And so I don't know that there are really any exceptions to this rule, but it is a nice variety that we see from our participants. You'll see some testimonials on the site as well, and there's some here that we're certainly very proud of. But what we're really after is making sure that this experience gives you the best of all worlds, gives you a taste of these 5-6 top researchers at Wharton, gives you hands-on dialogue with at least the 4 professors you'll meet on the faculty webinars, if not throughout the course. So it gives you sort of the best of what Wharton has to offer in data analytics, but also does it with a high touch, high level of service. There's the studies have shown over and over in the last few years that the completion rates for and the satisfaction rates as a result for online education will depend really on 2 factors: the underlying quality of the education, which we're very confident here, but also the way and the method that it's delivered. And we're making sure that you have that the white glove service is there. If there are questions, they need to be answered. If you have looking for extra help, that you're going to get it, that the digital platform works with 100% perfection, and these are important elements of the course experience. So just run real quick because I do want to get to your courses, to your questions. So again, we do look at the case studies, as I said before. We will take well-known case studies that are used in business education throughout the country, throughout the world, and we will often extract the key problem-solving elements from them. We want to give you the chance to be hands-on with these cases, but we also, you are busy professionals. As I said, the experience level here ranges from a few years to 30 to 40 years and everything in between. And we want to make sure that we're taking your time specifically on the questions and answers that matter. So you see elements of the case studies that are then brought up, and it's actually a lot of fun sometimes when we get into the gaming component of these cases. We talk about the help at your fingertips. Having people like myself and my fellow course leaders, having Don and his team at Wharton, and the professors also accessing directly. We want to make sure that this equates the on-campus experience as much as humanly possible using our virtual tools. What do you get out of this course? I think, as Don said in the beginning, what are you looking for in this course? We want to make sure that you're actually getting that out of this course. So hopefully these answers will be remarkably similar to the questions that we were asking at the beginning of this deck, but really understanding not only the underlying concepts behind business analytics, but how they are applied in the executive suite and how you can use these analytics techniques to not only brush up and become fluent in these topics yourselves, but also use them in the decision-making process to produce profit-generating, revenue-generating solutions for you and your organization. And at the end, you do get a certificate from the Wharton School. There was a question early on about, does this certificate help me in my job search or my resume? And again, there are no hard and fast answers to that. That would be I would hope we wouldn't be in a position of guaranteeing something like that, just like any educational degree. But the nice thing, and this is a well-known course from a very well-known institution, and so having this kind of certification at the very least signifies that you have put forth the time and the effort to complete the course. We do not give the certificate unless you complete, I believe it's 7 out of 8 assignments, but there's a completion bar. It is not meant to fail you in any respect. The grading process is reasonably reasonably benign, but it does acknowledge completion. It does acknowledge that you've put forth the effort each week to understand the assignment and complete the weekly assignment, and therefore this is a certificate you will have earned.
Dave, I might jump in there to
Sure.
add a comment regarding this question that a number of people have had about, will this help me get a job or change jobs if I'm in a spot where I want to shift jobs? And I think the fair answer to that is that the jury is out. I haven't seen published data that indicates that specifically related to business analytics, that study of business analytics through this format leads or predicts success in securing a position. I haven't seen data that says it doesn't either. I think that it's just that the jury is out. Zeke Emanuel did a study a couple of years back about generally the value for employers of the signal that is represented by people completing online courses of this type, certificate-based courses. And the survey data suggested that there was a positive correlation. But again, this is early on in this. Chris Ittner, who's the academic director, will specifically try to describe for you the value of this course, not as related to getting a different job, although to Dave's point, there's certainly value in the completion certificate from a well-known institution like Wharton, but rather what this is really for is to help you make better decisions in your current job by engaging with top scholars and bringing to the table your toughest questions. So the real value of this is to get better at your current job. We're hoping that by engaging with the state-of-the-art in business analytics, applying it to your company and your own knowledge of your environment, that we can have on one side of the table top scholars, on the other side of the table top practitioners, and new knowledge will emerge from the interaction between those two groups that neither could get on their own. So that's what we really think we're we're bringing to the table in terms of value. Now, if you do well at that, and you, as a result of this course, put together a project that is oriented to your own business and your own circumstance today, it's not, it's certainly very conceivable that your boss or others in the organization are going to notice what you've been able to do, or the extent to which you're bringing some intelligent frameworks and knowledge of analytics to your current job. So that's our kind of value proposition. But again, the focus, I think, is really on helping you make better decisions. Right. McKinsey recently did a study that suggested that the big missing component in the analytics initiatives that have been launched in recent years that they've studied, it's not data science, it's not the source of data, it's not the availability of data. We're swimming in data, and there's an awful lot of work, good stuff out there in terms of building up your understanding of R or the programming languages. The real issue is someone who can understand your specific business well enough to help shape questions that can be informed by an engagement with data, and to get serious about trying to make that happen. So I'm hoping that helps a little bit.
No, that's great. And as I was reviewing some of the questions, as just the mechanism is such that we're unable, while we're presenting in full screen mode, we're unable to look at the questions. So I saw, I want to happily reply to Michael's reply to mine, and I don't think it's disrespectful at all in terms of that dialogue, which Don touched on. We don't have, as Don said, the jury is still out statistically on this data, and I would say, attribution for whether it's this course or, quite frankly, any number of factors in getting a job is still quite weak. And I mean, ironically, it is the underlying topic in terms of people analytics that we're going to be talking about in this course. So we certainly would not want to give you an answer. For example, I mean, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg both dropped out of Harvard to found very successful companies. I would not advise Harvard sophomores to drop out to have a large chance of founding companies. And so, that's certainly not a statement of the value of finishing your undergraduate education. At the same time, they represent very, very well-known outliers to the process. And so, in terms of a less cartoonish example, I do think that if you're taking the course, there should be a number of motivating factors. One of them is just an inner desire to want to be on top of this work. And this is a nice vehicle to do that. And it's a structured vehicle to do that. So as opposed to just reading a white paper or taking an online, I don't want to use competitor names or anything, but an online program where it is open-ended, this has a bit of assurance so that it's almost like a diet plan. You could do it on your own, but this assures that you're getting bits and bytes of information each week, that you're digesting it, that you're absorbing it, and that you're also demonstrating some knowledge. So again, there's no one panacea to these challenges, but this is certainly something that has ticked a good number of boxes in recent history. And I think one of the questions, Martin had a question about the legal challenges. We do talk about GDPR in the context of some of the regulatory impacts on data and some of the limitations more generally. Now, how specifically we're going to get into some of the California laws and the New York legislation that's being discussed, a lot of that's going to come from the Q&A piece, your dialogue with professors. But I don't want to paint this. This is not a sort of the regulatory aspect of data analytics course. We're certainly not going to be afraid of that. And as I said, the GDPR is a nice, not nice, but it's a key indicator of some of the overall legal, ethical, regulatory challenges to data that we're seeing. And those concepts will definitely come up, but it is not, how deep it goes in that direction. It's going to be, it'll come up in conversation more than being a primary focus.
Yeah, let me add on to that too. Specifically with regards to the ethical issues of the use of data, that's a regular topic that's addressed in this course, and this is an area too that's a clear example of how this is not settled science. So one of the reasons to join a course like this is to engage with an open inquiry that's ongoing, and that in some regards also serves as an introduction for you into other venues beyond the course in which people are struggling with these issues now. So both in terms of the new capabilities that are afforded businesses by intelligently using data to understand your customer better and predict their activity, but also on the flip side of that is the appropriate use of data in a way that's that respects privacy and that respects the rights of the individual who happen to be your customers. So all of these things are matters for discussion and for including in our both our in our discussion boards, but also questions to raise directly with the faculty. They're dealing with these issues on a regular basis.
Some questions that we see: do we have lifetime access to the recorded videos? Usually, you'll have access over the course of a year. So that anything that, all of the aspects of the course are recorded. Any webinar, any interaction is recorded, and you do generally have access for a year. People will often say, I know Leon's question is, I have a trip to China in the last 2 weeks of April. If you are traveling and you're the nice thing is a lot of these modules are on demand, and we have global audience, so you still can plug in. But if you're still prevented from doing that, you would just email us through the support platform and get an extension on that week's assignment. And extensions are granted. It's not about having to approve your excuse so much as just keeping track. So for your sake, to keep you on track and organized. So we will be doing that. So you can always get extensions, but there will likely be another course starting usually in May. So you'll have, this is a February, March, April course. And then usually they'll have another run starting in May. Again, it's not hard and fast. A lot of it is based on people's schedules and demand, but I encourage you to email us through the support tab or through the course site, and we'll give you the most up-to-date information on that. Kamnesh Kumar says, what is the frequency of the classes schedule? Each week a batch of video modules is released, and those modules are on demand. So we generally recommend anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 hours per week to spend on this. At the low end, if you are already familiar with the topics and looking for a review or a brush up, perhaps at the middle to high end, if you are either watching more slowly or more comfortable getting the information in smaller bites, and perhaps want to watch the videos more often. People sometimes watch the same videos 2 or 3 times to really absorb it. So it really depends, but in the most part, the bulk of the week is on demand. Each week there will be at least 3 or 4, depending on the number of course leaders, but each of us hosts 1 office hours a week. So you have the option, and it is completely optional, you have the option to participate in 1, 2, 3, or 4 different office hours per week, or 0. And then there'll be a faculty webinar, usually about every other week during the course, 4 faculty webinars, 8 weeks in the course. And it's, for those webinars, again, that's a fixed time, and that's an hour for every other week. And so, and those webinars are recorded. So if you're not able to plug in during a time that's friendly to your time zone, and they are scattered throughout the day, then you can access the recorded version.
Also, just to add on to that too, Dave, is I would encourage people who can't make a webinar to post the questions to the program leaders so we can get them in front of the faculty. We like those sessions to be as much two-way interaction as possible. So that's the real big value of doing it and setting aside a specific synchronous time. And so we'd really like to focus that on your questions. That means, by the way, that we need you to do your homework and come to those sessions prepared so that, we push the faculty as hard as we can to get specific. I've noticed a number of questions regarding specific industries. We have a physician online. We've got some others who are studying marketing right now. And the general question is, does this apply to a specific industry? And the answer is that we have selected topics that cross industries. So understanding issues associated with some of the cases. It may not sound like there's a direct tie between an operations management issue in a manufacturing setting to running a hospital. But in fact, the faculty will tell you that the techniques and frameworks and analyses that underlies the study of processes in a factory and the study of queuing theory in a hospital are related, so that there are ways in which techniques do address a range of industries. Now, the faculty all do consulting with different groups, and there is a fair amount of consultation happening with healthcare groups. But we are relying on you to be the knowledgeable expert for your region and your specific company and your industry. And that's why we're asking for you to come to the table prepared to kind of push the topics. Also, it is the case that this group of people who have been attracted to this class have brought a lot of experience themselves to the table. So don't underestimate the value of the connections you have with the fellow students in the course in terms of both getting immediate questions answered, as well as establishing some networking that might prove valuable over time.
And I would say, again, looking at the number of questions that are still open, the vast majority deal with the applicability of this course to me, or the ability of my ability to use this course as a springboard to, to X or Y. And I think, as tempting as it is to just say yes, that we wouldn't be doing our jobs in that respect. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be truthful. I think with any academic endeavor, whether it is this course or anything else you do, I don't think it's repeating the obvious, or perhaps it is, to say that a lot of it has to do with the mindsets of what you're putting into this course, and where you see it fitting in on your life resume and your job resume. So sometimes it's very easy. Sometimes we have companies who will fund the participation of their managers in a course like this. In fact, this course in particular is very popular in that regard, because there's a specific skill set that they're asking people to brush up on, and this fulfills a lot of those requirements or checks the boxes. In other cases, it's someone who is just thinking perhaps about a career change now or in the near future, and wants to bring this component of business analytics into the fore. And I think if you're in doubt, I would say that, really a much of the benefit of this course is determined by your approach. If you're ready to benefit from this course, or quite frankly, any other course, then you will derive benefit. I think this does as good or better job as anything else in the industry, partly because it draws from these handful of departments at Wharton that are considered to be best in space and best in field in terms of their research. So the raw materials of this course are without, are somewhat beyond reproach, but in terms of the applicability to you, a lot of that comes from you, and it has to be when you're ready to take the time, both during the course, but also having access to the materials after the course. So we continue to welcome those questions, but I also don't want to frustrate you by not having easy answers, because the easy answers would not be truthful answers. It's really meant to help you think and get to that decision of whether and when this course is right.
And with that, we've sort of reached the top of the hour. I apologize to those whose questions we didn't get to. Again, if you have specific questions that you can send to us, we can try to follow up offline. But again, I'm hoping that you give some serious thought to whether this is the right format. It takes someone who is going to dedicate themselves a few hours a week to doing this work, to coming prepared to what is in fact only beneficial if it's an open and shared inquiry. So we're looking for the right group of people to help us engage in that inquiry, and hope that this session has helped you figure out if that's you.
There's one question I wanted to answer quickly because I pressed the wrong button here, but Pradnya asks about can we bring our data to run a regression analysis? We do try to give you the frameworks that you can use your data, but for the purposes of the course, we use, in order to just keep the consistency, we'll use data sets that we provide. So and hopefully you'll be able to take those same concepts and use them for your own data, but we just don't have the mechanisms for everyone to bring his or her own data because we'd have to validate that in advance. And we'll all try to answer other questions in due course. But as Don said, we want to be respectful of your time for those who have other commitments, but also say that if you have any questions that we haven't answered either directly or through this conversation, feel free to submit them. You see the Apply Now button. That in itself is not binding you to anything. So as you look through the process, feel free to use that as a way to ask questions about the course. And make sure you're making the right decision. We have a couple of weeks before we get started. I will say just the one bit of editorialism to say is it's a lot of fun. For me, I really enjoyed the chance to have not only collaborate with Don and the online team at Wharton, but also have direct exposure to what these professors are paid to do on a regular basis. And it's fun to be plugged into that process in real time, and then go out and watch people apply that into the workplace. So we would love to welcome you to this course, but also want to make sure you're making the decision that's best for you. So take the time as you look and log on to the site. If you do have questions, feel free to email and we'll try to get to them as soon as possible.
And with that, I guess we'll wish you the best of luck in your work, in your own businesses, wherever you are in the world today, and hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.